Thank you for joining us today for 30 minutes, where we'll be having an intentional conversation about racism in Canada. This is one conversation of a three-part series, and joining me today is Dr. Nana Owusu.
Hi, everybody.
Hello. I want to start off as just kind of getting to know you a little bit. Just kind of tell us, like, where were you born? Where'd you grow up? And then where'd you live? That kind of stuff.
Yeah, okay, sounds good. Well, first of all, yeah, thank you for having me. I'm really excited to do this and to be a part of this. So I was born in Canada. I was born in Toronto, Ontario. I grew up in Edmonton, Alberta. We moved there when I was about 5 years old. And then after that, I went back to Ontario, did more schooling there. I ended up moving to Chicago to go to ICO. And yeah, so after school, I sort of lived in a whole number of places. We lived in Florida. We practiced down there for a few years after we graduated. And then we ended up back in Winnipeg. Winnipeg is where my wife is from. She was born and raised here. And so eventually we ended up back here in Winnipeg to start our family.
Yeah, that's great. And what is your family background?
So my family's from Ghana, West Africa. So my parents immigrated from Ghana to Canada about a month or two before I was born. And sort of in search of a better life, as they say, right? Looking for the land of opportunity. And so they were really big on education. And so they both moved to go to school in Toronto.
Wow. Okay. Well, that must be a big change. Growing up, was there any point, or when did you kind of learn feeling like your background makes you different?
You know, that's a really good question. I'll say it was sort of pointed out to me. You know, my family, obviously, you know, I'm the only kid, and so I was sort of in my own little bubble. And we were how we were, and I didn't see us as really a whole lot different from anybody else. But it was probably maybe in first grade, when it was sort of pointed out to me. I remember at my school in Edmonton, we had this thing that they did called Student of the Week, and I was the Student of the Week, and you would sit in the front of the class, and all the other kids would interview you, and all of the questions that they asked me were about, why is my hair like that, or why are my hands so dirty, or why or what does it feel like to have such dark skin, or what does it feel like? And they use terms that I didn't even know. I actually remember very specifically, little girl said to me, "What's it like being a Negro?"
What?
Yeah. And I didn't even really know what that meant. My family had never said, "Hey, this is what that you are a Negro." Like, that was not a term that we used. And so I didn't know how to answer that. And so my teacher at the time, I guess, called my dad and said, "Hey, I think that it might be time to start having some of these conversations with your son, because people are asking a lot of questions, and the school is not very diverse. And so I expect that there will be more questions." So she reached out to my dad and wanted to make sure that she could sort of help facilitate those questions and help me answer them as well. Because I mean, I was 6, 7 years old. I learned a lot very quickly. That I was different, because I didn't really notice it until everybody else started saying it to me. That was in Edmonton. So, and I mean, obviously I could see that there were people of different colors, but I just never really thought to classify them or to box people. You know, I knew my family was from Ghana. And so I knew that my cultural background was that of somebody from West Africa, but I didn't really think much about the fact that the skin color was what people were seeing, as opposed to the cultural background.
And you have also lived in cities in the States. What are those cities again?
So let's see, spent a little bit of time in California, in Chicago, in all around Florida, in New York. So seeing most of the bigger cities in the States, I guess.
Okay. And how would you say your experience was in those cities?
It was interesting. Florida in particular was a little bit different. It was definitely an interesting experience. You know, when we lived in Florida, we lived in Central Florida. So Ormond Beach is probably about 25 minutes or so from Daytona Beach, and we were practicing down there. And I remember meeting a lot of people who were shocked that, "Oh, okay, so you're coming in the exam room. That's great. I guess you're here to help out. Let me know when the doctor's going to come, because there's no way it could be you."
Wow.
You know? And so that was in Florida. Yeah. I mean, it happened. To be quite honest, it happens here sometimes. You know,
right.
In Winnipeg, it happened. It's happened in probably every city that I practiced actually, but
Mm.
it used to happen there every day. That okay, so obviously you're the hired
Wow.
help. Just let me know when the
Wow.
doctor's coming, and I will share my information with them. I'm not really sure why you're in here. So it was different in each city.
Mhm.
Like Chicago has a huge Black population,
Mm.
and so it was probably a little bit more, whether I wanted to or not, maybe a little bit more easy to sort of blend,
Right.
into
Right.
whereas and same in Toronto even.
Mm. Mhm.
And people just in the different cities in the different states, I just kind of learned that um, I suppose maybe just based on people's exposure, how much
Right.
exposure they've had to Black people. Some people, I had met some people who had never interacted with a Black person before.
Mhm.
Um, and so depending on which state or city I was in, I think that the experiences were just a little bit different based on how they were feeling, not so much how I
Right.
was feeling.
Would you say it's kind of similar in the cities in Canada?
Yeah, I would say that as Canadians, I mean, we've got this reputation for being
Mhm.
friendly
Yeah.
and we're happy, et cetera, et cetera, and it's
Mhm.
true, And I'm a proud Canadian. I love it here. I think one thing that we're naive to is the fact that these things happen in Canada too.
Right.
People often ask me about my experiences with the police,
Mhm.
and I have been pulled over or um, pulled out of my car or
Mhm.
followed or I'll say harassed
Mhm.
many more times in Canada than in the States,
Wow.
definitely. But
Mm.
I guess the difference between here in Canada and there was that, and not to generalize because it wasn't the same every time.
Right.
Although it was rarely a good experience, but it wasn't the
Mhm.
same every time. But generally in Canada, I didn't fear my life. There were probably two instances that I feared my life in Canada, whereas in the States, there might have only been one incident where I didn't fear my life. All the rest of the times I
Oh,
thought
okay.
this could be it. So
Wow.
it was so there were differences, but I mean, even just not to get too political, but even just the difference in Canada versus the States with the thoughts and ideas around guns. Um,
Mhm.
in Canada, I have much less of a fear or concern about the idea of being shot, whereas in the United
Mm.
States, guns are just so much more prevalent. It doesn't necessarily mean I'm going to be shot, but guns are just much more prevalent. I was at
Right.
Walmart and saw a guy's gun fall into the conveyor belt and I didn't, being Canadian, I didn't know what to do about that. I didn't know how to handle that.
Right.
Everybody else around me just kind of said, "Oh, hey, man, you dropped your gun." Whereas
Right.
as a Canadian, like that was not
Yeah.
normal for me. And it may not be normal in every state. I don't claim that it is, but it was different for me. So,
Uh-huh.
um, yeah.
So maybe share with us kind of one police incident in Canada.
In Canada, okay, well, so oh boy, so I guess as a quick aside, I'll say, I
Mhm.
mean, for those who follow me on Instagram or on Facebook,
Mhm.
I wrote I had a post explaining one incident,
Right.
and I've probably talked about that one in particular a couple of times, but I think the thing that's hard, and it just kind of made me think about when you asked, is it probably took me 3 minutes to write it, but it took me 45
Mm.
minutes to an hour to figure out which
Mhm.
incident I was going to talk about,
Right.
because honestly there've been so many. But I guess that one I'll share because some people
Mhm.
already know about it. But I had just finished. I used to play football, and I had just finished playing a football game, and I was with some friends in my car. In This is
Mhm.
in Ontario, uh, and we were just kind of in a hurry, so we just said, you know what, we're gonna go meet up with some people. We're gonna shower later. We're starving. Let's just drive to Burger King. So we actually even still had our pads on our lower half, like our football pants, and we'd taken
Right.
off our shoulder pads. We're wearing t-shirts, and
Mhm.
we thought, we're dirty, we're gross, so we're just gonna sit in the parking lot. It's 2 or 3 in the afternoon,
Mhm.
and so we're eating Burger King. Went through the drive-through, and we're eating Burger King in the parking lot,
Uh-huh.
in my car. No loud music, nothing like that. And I hear just tap 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 against my window, and I look, and police officer. So I roll down my window, and he says, "What are you doing?" I says, "Well,
Mhm.
we're eating Burger King." Like I'm not.
Right.
I don't really know how to answer that.
Yeah.
I and I'm always very. I try to be very careful. Yes sir and no sir. I'm not. I don't want to end up being a newspaper headline. So
Mhm.
I try to be as respectful as possible. I said, we're just eating Burger King. We just finished playing a football game. He says, "How do I know you played a football game?" I'm like, "Well, we're still wearing pads. Like you can see, like we've got football stuff in the car right here. Like this is we're just having Burger King, then we're going to go meet some
Yeah.
friends. And he started to get more and more angry. I guess my answers weren't telling him what he thought he wanted to know. And so he reached in and he unlocked my car and he opened it. And then he grabbed me and then he threw me into the street. And so or into the parking lot, sorry. And so I'm lying there and he's got his knee on my face and he's hitting my face into the pavement, and I can see everything in my car, like CDs, whatever else, like flying out of my car, and they're just throwing it in the street. And all I could think at the time was how possible it could be that they could say, hey, look what I just found in this guy's car, and holding whatever. And I mean, I would have nothing. I've never done a drug. I don't even drink alcohol. Like, I've never done anything, but it would have been very easy to say, hey, look, we found this on this guy or in this guy's car, right?
Yeah.
And so I was very worried about that because I didn't know how it was going to come out. And I kept trying to say, sorry, I haven't done anything. And he didn't like that. So he kept slamming my head into the ground. And like, actually, you know what, probably beyond that experience, one of the worst parts of it was when you see somebody being apprehended or treated like that, your immediate assumption is that they've done something. So here I am, I'm a good student at the time. I think I'm working on my second or third degree. And I'm lying in the street and people are walking by and I can hear them saying, look at that guy, look, I wonder what he's done.
Right.
And I'm thinking all I am guilty of is what you are about to go do. And that's eating Burger King, And so that was a tough experience. It's even, thinking about it, to talk about it today, that was a really difficult experience. And it ended very abruptly, just like it started. It always, for me, all the experiences like this that I've had end the same way. They end up telling me you're lucky, and then they leave. And I guess that means I'm lucky that they didn't find anything, but I'm like, like, I don't feel lucky at all. Like, that luck would not bring me to get thrown into the street for eating Burger King, so it's that was one experience that like I said, I've shared a couple of times, but that happened in Canada. And I think generally when people hear that story, they assume that it happened in the United States, but that and many, many, many others happened in Canada.
Did you escalate or did you report that and then just saying it was unfair, or do you know of anything happening to the police officer?
So I didn't report it. I didn't. It was probably, I don't know. I mean, at that time I was probably 24, maybe 23. That was incident number, I don't know, 200. So by that point, I had things happen to me in the past, and people said to me, you should report that to the police. So I would go to the police and I would tell them what happened. And nothing ever came of it. Usually, actually, what came of it was more accusations towards me. So I think I just developed this sort of apathy, this feeling that it doesn't matter what I say, they are untouchable. I am not. So I'm gonna try to keep my nose clean and stay out of there. So nothing came of it. I didn't make any effort for anything to come.
Wow, that's hard to hear. And you were with friends at that time. How did they react?
So I was with one black guy and one white guy, and the black guy was in the passenger seat, and he got pulled out, but he was just leaning up against the car. They had him pinned up against my car, and then the white guy. So my car was a 2-door at the time, and so they didn't pull him out. They asked him to get out. I didn't see all this. They told me after the fact. They asked him to get out, so he got out, and they asked what was going on. He's like, we're just eating Burger King. And apparently, as he tells the story, he just stood there and had a conversation with one of the officers.
Like a civil, normal conversation.
Like, I mean, it may have been hostile. I don't know, but he was talking, he wasn't in cuffs. He didn't have his hands behind his back. He wasn't pinned against the car or pinned on the ground. But he was talking, and probably, as I think about it, I could hear him. He was heated. He was probably yelling, get off my friend, he had a conversation with the officer, and I didn't. And so their reaction was very, like, they were just shocked. I think that So the one guy who was in the passenger seat was upset. Obviously, he had been pinned against the car. He hadn't done anything either. He was very upset by it. I remember actually he cried a lot. I think at that point of his life, maybe it had happened to me more than him. And
Wow.
you sort of build this armor, I'll call it, where you sort of protect yourself, and it's not just from
Right.
brutality, but from whether it's microaggressions or just little comments here and there. There was a time
Right.
when I didn't speak out against them
Mm.
like
Mhm.
I would
Mhm.
today,
Right. Right.
not understanding how, maybe, or feeling alone, maybe. I don't know why. I can't
Yeah.
answer why. People have asked me why. I don't know why.
Yeah.
You can't put a finger on why,
Right.
but he cried a lot, so
Mhm.
he didn't say much.
Right.
The guy who was in the back seat,
Right.
my white friend, was mind blown. I mean, as
Right.
he said it, so I remember talking about this with him years after, and he
Mhm.
said if he had seen it in a movie, he wouldn't have believed it. He would have said, "Yeah, that's too much. There's no way that that's actually
Right.
reality. This movie's
Right.
too far that way."
Right.
Um, or had somebody just told him the story, he said he wouldn't have believed it
Right.
himself. And so to live it, he was shocked.
Right.
And I mean, even though it had happened to me so many times before, not necessarily being thrown in the street to
Mhm.
that extent, but I had
Mhm.
been harassed so many times before, that was still shocking. Every time it happened, it was still
Yeah,
shocking.
of
It was
course.
sort of
Yeah.
shocking, but not surprising, if that makes sense. You know what I mean? Like,
That,
I would
yeah.
see a car pull up and I'd say, okay, something might happen, but you're never prepared to have your face in the gravel. You
That's,
know?
yeah, it's crazy to think that it's shocking, yet not surprising. And I
Yeah.
think that itself summarized the whole problem. Do you
Mhm.
feel like throughout the years it's become different, or do you feel like it's getting worse, getting better?
Well, I think it's being documented more. Smartphones
Mm,
are making, like, that experience was in the early 2000s.
mm,
So there were no iPhones yet, and
right,
so that wasn't documented by anybody walking by. I guarantee you that if it happened today, somebody would be videoing it,
right,
right?
right.
So is it happening more or less? It's hard to say.
Mm,
It might
mhm,
be just the same.
mhm,
But I will say this time around, we haven't solved anything yet. We've got a long way to go still. I mean, it's
mhm,
been hundreds of years. It's not going to be solved overnight. But with everybody being at home through COVID, and
mhm,
Amy Cooper happening on day one, and then George Floyd happening on day two, I
mhm,
think, and nobody having anywhere to go, we're
right.
forced to be home in isolation and
Mm,
watching the news and updates on
mhm,
Twitter and Instagram. Like, I think that it forced people to pay attention.
right.
People who I've had countless people reach out to me asking me questions about this sort of thing, and
Mhm,
what experiences I've had, and I think that what is getting better is the willingness to believe or understand that something is happening.
right.
Um, and again, it doesn't always mean that it is only Black people. It
Mhm,
doesn't always mean that it is always the police. It's
right,
it's everywhere. It's, well, you hear
mhm,
the term all the time now. It's systemic.
right.
It's ingrained in our society and in our culture, and it's not always to the point of violence or to the point of
Mhm,
hostility.
mhm,
Sometimes it's just simple day-to-day
right,
comments or actions. I've
right.
bothered walking into my own clinic, unlocking the door of my
Mm,
own clinic and being harassed by a civilian wondering if I'm breaking into the building
wow.
while I'm in my shirt and tie. Like, it's,
That's
yeah.
crazy. Kind of share with us what are some of the stuff that you make sure you do so you don't become a victim, or you make sure like, all right, I'm going to do everything I can to make people feel
Yeah.
comfortable.
It's so I'll tell you honestly, it's only in the last 2 years that I've started paying attention to what I've been doing. I've for years have
Mm,
done things differently. I'll, if I'm walking up to an elevator and I'm noticing that it's especially at nighttime,
mhm,
me and say me one specific example that I can remember, me and a white lady, we were walking towards an elevator at the same time. It
mhm,
wasn't dark, but it was approaching evening,
right.
and my thought is, I don't want, I know how some people react. When I walk
Right.
by a car door and somebody dives across to lock their door as I'm
Mm,
walking by this on the
mhm,
sidewalk, I
yeah.
know how people react. Um,
Right.
and so I know that I will often try to make sure that, I'm visible. I don't want to be accused of doing anything. And it's
Mm-hmm.
not that every white person is going to accuse me of doing something,
Yeah.
but when somebody else, when you can feel somebody else's concern just
Mm-hmm.
because you're being, just
Yeah.
because of your being, you know, it's my natural, I guess, response, right or wrong, is to make sure that I can show, hey, look, I am doing nothing. I don't necessarily say anything, but I try to make sure that I'm on my side. You know, I
Mm-hmm.
hit my button first, so there's no, if there's by any off chance that we're getting off the same floor,
Mm-hmm.
it's not perceived that I might be trying to follow that
Right,
person, you
right,
know, things
right.
like that. The reason why I say 2 years ago, it started coming to mind, like to watch myself and see what I was doing. I was I was on vacation with my brother-in-law and sister-in-law, and
Mm-hmm.
and their kid and our kids, and
Mm-hmm.
my brother-in-law is white,
Mm-hmm.
and we're really close, and we were out with the kids. The kids were still in the car,
Mm-hmm.
and we wanted to ask this lady. We were in a city we didn't know anything about, and
Mm-hmm.
we wanted to ask this lady how to get somewhere.
Yeah.
And so I didn't even notice that I did this. And he told me after, and his jaw was on the floor, on the ground, and he was like, "Did you see what you had to do to ask this lady?" So this white lady was helping her, putting her little kid into a car seat in her minivan.
Right.
And I guess what I did was, I was wearing a baseball hat, and I
Yeah.
took off my hat, I
Yeah.
put it in the back of the car,
Yeah.
I walked around her, like she was sort of facing the other way, so I
Right.
walked probably about 15, 20 feet behind her. I walked around her, and I came back towards
Oh,
her from the front so she could see
right.
me coming. And I
Okay.
waved and I said, "Oh, excuse me." And as my
Wow.
brother-in-law says it, he's like, I put on my safe voice, you know,
Right.
he's like, all bass was gone from your voice at that moment. He's like,
Mm-hmm.
you put on your safe voice. And I was like, "Hey, excuse me. I'm trying to figure out how to get to this area. Can you
Yeah.
explain?" And
Right.
happy to do it. And maybe
Mm-hmm.
she wouldn't have been concerned had I come from behind. But
Right.
I
Right.
think
Right.
that what that experience showed me is that I've just learned the reaction that I
Yeah.
get when I do walk up behind somebody and say, "Hey, excuse me," isn't positive, you know.
Right.
So
Yeah.
uh, and
Wow.
he pointed it out. He's like, "I was wearing a baseball hat too. I would have just said, 'Hey, can you tell me how to get over there?'" You know. But
Wow.
it's just
Yeah.
in me now. So I've learned how to sort of protect myself, and that's something that my my parents taught me as well. My dad
Mm.
really, he didn't tell me you have to walk around people like that, but he made clear that there would be people who weren't going to
Mm.
feel comfortable in my presence all the time. And that
Mm.
didn't mean that
Mm-hmm.
I didn't need to be there,
Mm-hmm.
and maybe they needed to learn how to get comfortable. But
Mm-hmm.
if I was to force myself on them or force myself into their space, I was not going to be the one who was going to come out on top. I was going to be the one who was going to come out
Wow.
potentially
Yeah.
in trouble. So
Right.
I
Right.
had to learn how to interact in a different way.
Right.
So I wouldn't put somebody else in a position where they were uncomfortable. Even though they may be wrong to be uncomfortable, I was the one who was going to have to watch my steps, you know.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Even in optometry school, actually, my roommate in optometry school was white. And I remember we were coming home from the gym at ICO,
Mm-hmm.
and we'd been playing basketball, and we're both in sweats and a t-shirt and
Right.
baseball caps, dressed exactly the same.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember one incident where he was walking, we were coming on the street, and there was somebody in the driver's side of a car and nobody in the passenger side.
Mm-hmm.
And the sidewalk was on the passenger side, of course,
Yeah.
in America. And
Right.
he was walking by the driver's side, and the person just looked at him and nodded.
Uh-huh.
And then I saw the person in that side, so I went straight to the sidewalk. I wasn't about to walk by somebody's driver's side door with them in the car.
Right.
And so I went to the sidewalk, and the guy turned and saw me and, like, arms in the air, and dove across the car to lock the door. And my roommate was like,
Wow.
"I can't believe what I just got a smile, you know." And
Yeah.
so that to be honest, I barely noticed it. It wasn't the first time, but
Yeah.
he mentioned it, and
Mm-hmm.
it stuck with me, you know. And so, and I've never asked him. I imagine it probably stuck with him too.
Are these things kind of just, you have something that you have figured out on your own?
So I was pretty young when my dad started explaining things to me. After that situation, probably in grade 2, and he was a bit of an activist, you know. And so after he started explaining to me stories from his life. I think that, and after, there were days when I would sit at home and wonder if he's going to make it home, and
Wow.
he's a professional. He wasn't getting himself, it wasn't because I thought he was going to get himself in trouble, but it was because I started to understand, if I'm getting followed home, he's getting followed home too.
Right,
If
right.
I'm getting, bothered or pulled over, well, so is he. And so I think it's all of it. I think learning from him, watching his experiences, and just sort of understanding, like, you only have to hurt yourself once to know that it's going to hurt again the next time.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
And so
Yeah.
it's immediate defense mechanism, I guess, to sort of put up
Right.
that armor. And that armor I think it can happen a couple of ways, right? It can probably, and I'm no psychiatrist or psychologist, but as I see it with myself and my friends, who have lived similar situations to me and family members, I feel like you can either retreat and, you could potentially fight back. You could lash back out, and every time something happens, you're angry about it, and everybody's going to know about it. As opposed to, like I was saying earlier, like sort of keeping it to yourself.
Yeah.
Or you can just sort of live it and try to do something about it. And I think that's kind of how I ended up. That's probably how I do most things in my life. I just sort of probably subconsciously said, okay, what am I going to do about this?
Yeah.
And so I'm learning now. I do a Zoom call with high school friends once a month, old high school friends who I'm still really close with. And one of them was telling me stories or telling stories of things that I used to say in high school that I don't even remember saying. How I would react when we'd all be walking to the mall and there'd be a police siren,
Wow.
and how I would react versus how they would react, and how this one girl in particular, she would say, like, it was shocking to her that I didn't feel comfortable or safe, because she always felt safe. If she heard a siren, she knew it wasn't for her, therefore she was safe.
Wow.
Whereas
Yeah.
for me, I guess what I used to verbalize was that I don't know that it's not for me. And so, again, I don't mean to make this all about the police. I think there are many different issues,
Right.
that just being one of them. But yeah.
Do you feel like we need to change your conversation in a way, like, and not just kind of following what the states is saying? Or do you think that we should be more intentional and turn our conversations more rather than following what the states?
Yeah, I think we need to be more intentional and be willing to recognize that it's happening. I think that, like I was saying earlier, in Canada, we've got this love for the fact that we believe that the world believes we are happy and friendly people all the time, and that our country is safe and the healthcare is great and it's easy, and but I think that our problem here is our unwillingness to recognize that there is a problem. And if you're willing to turn a blind eye to what's happening, you can't solve a problem, right?
Right.
And so whenever I would explain things that happened to even friends, close friends, I would tell them stories of things that happened in my life. And immediately the response was, "Oh, but that was probably in the States. That had to be in the United States. That doesn't happen here."
Right.
And so it still takes a lot of explanation and a lot of discussion around the idea that, no, man, like, that happens here too. And to the point where I think where we are today is, and I saw this coming, and I don't expect everybody to fight everybody else's battles, but early June, George Floyd happens. The world is on fire. Everybody's fighting for it. And people said to me, "Hey, does this feel better? Does this feel different?" I said, "Well, yeah, it feels different, because I've never seen a response like this globally." However, I said, ask me in 2 to 3 months what it feels like, because I want to know that it's not just onto the next, whatever the next, oh, there's a scandal that so-and-so, Kanye's running for president. Okay, well, now we'd rather talk about that, instead of what's actually happening. So I think that it's really easy to move on to the next thing. And in Canada, I think that that's our defense is, oh, it doesn't happen here like them. We're not the United States. We don't do it like that. So we're fine.
Yeah.
And I think that that's dangerous. I think that's really, really dangerous.
Right. I really agree with that. And I think, like you said, the stories that I hear, oh, that's probably in the States, but no, it's actually in Canada. We can't just run away from it. You have to identify our own problems, have our own conversations. And I think you're really highlighting a lot of that. And I think it's so thank you so much for really sharing that. You probably had thought about it, because you do have young children right now, and they are growing up in this world as we know it. how have you thought about maybe to prepare them? Have you started having these conversations with them?
Yeah, I think about it every day. Honestly, I think about them a whole lot more than I think about myself, you know. Um, they, I guess probably the main reason why I think about them so much more is because they're going to have so much more. They're so innocent right now. They think this world is perfect, you know, and I've already built that armor that I was talking about. You know, I know I can take care of myself. I know that I can do the right things and make the right choices to keep myself out of trouble, to the extent that I can, anyways. I guess the thing for my kids is that not only am I preparing them, but I feel like I'm telling them that there's no Easter bunny, you know, like it's just shattering this world that, hey, or like their world, that this world is not perfect, but that's okay. And these are the things that you need to do to help navigate your way through it. That for me is probably the most heartbreaking part, is that, you know, when I was young, I would have these types of conversations, and I very naive to believe it, but I would have told you that by the year 2020 that we'd be good, you know. Again, very naive, but that was my hope and expectation. And so now, you know, to have young children and to have to think about what the world is going to be like for them, you know, my daughter is very, very intelligent, but to be a Black woman thinking about, you know, all of her ambition, all the things already that I know she wants to do, and to think she is Black and she is a woman. And so is she going to have a tougher time attaining some of her professional and personal goals because somebody doesn't believe that she should be there just because of what she looks like or who she is? My sons, you know, whether it be violence, my youngest in particular, I think is going to be a really big person. I think he's going to be huge. And I know, when I was playing football, I was a lot bigger than I am now, and I still get, but it's hard to talk about, but I still get looks, comments, things like that, and I'm not nearly as big as I was then. And I think he's going to be 5 times bigger than I ever was. And so that what concerns me is he always going to be perceived as a threat? You know, intelligence aside, it doesn't matter. Like I worry for them that they're going to have to do the things that I had to do. You know, I remember when I was doing my master's, I remember if I was leaving, I was at U of T, if I was leaving the school or if I was working out or whatever, I always had a collared shirt in my trunk. I used to have an earring, and if I was driving home, I would take out my earring and I would put on a collared shirt. I might be dripping sweat, just finished playing sports, but I was putting on a collared shirt to drive home. I was going to do anything I could to look less threatening. You know, whatever that threatening look was, that might be normal for some others. For me, was threatening. I had learned, so I was going to do things to try to look less threatening, just so I could preserve myself. So to answer your question, I don't want my kids to have to do it, but I've started. My wife and I both have started those conversations with them. Not necessarily to the extent that somebody might want to hurt you, but they saw what happened with George Floyd, and we didn't shelter them from it. And my 6-year-old asked me if he's the only one who that's happened to, and
that's a tough question to answer.
I wanted to say, well, maybe today, but maybe not even today, you know. And so it's that's the hard part, is what life are they going to have to live? They're all going to do well for themselves, I do firmly believe, but you know, that whether that professional distinction or whatever it may be isn't sufficient to make people believe that you're safe or that you are equal. I'll even say in some cases, just by looking at you, you know, nobody knows when they look at me that I have 4 degrees or that I own multiple clinics or whatever. They don't know that. They see what they see and they react accordingly. So that's what breaks my heart with my kids. So the conversations are tough. I mean, they're slow. We give them in bite-sized pieces, you know, but we're making them understand to the best ability that we can what it looked like today, and that, but also to explain that we're hopeful. You know, there was a rally here after George Floyd in our city, and there were Tens of thousands of people showed up,
Mm-hmm.
and it was great. You know, Winnipeg's a small city, and there were like, if I'm not mistaken, like 14,000 people or something like that, or showed up, and so it was a great response, and it was peaceful. It was safe. It was, and we made sure to take our kids. You know, I wanted them to see it and understand that there are people out there who will be of support and who are starting to understand this and will be there with them and for them.
Yeah,
so,
for sure. Well, I think you're doing I know you're doing everything you can, you know, having conversations with them and also just being very open just to share your experience. I think that is one of the most powerful things that you can already do. I really do feel like we need to identify our own problems and then really just kind of show up as Canadians, you know, live up to our reputation. So that actually concludes our first segment of our first conversation. So be sure to catch us for the other two conversations that I will also be having with Dr. Nana Owusu. Thanks.